Hello everybody, welcome back to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, bringing you a brand new review, and today I'm going to be talking about Season 1 of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, the latest Game of Thrones spin-off series based on the novellas from the 90s. I'm going to be giving my spoiler-free thoughts on this. I have been very fortunate. HBO sent me all 6 episodes to watch, and I've got a very specific list of things I'm not going to talk about, and I also want to make this the best experience you can for when you start watching the show this Sunday. So that is going to be me doing that very polite little intro before I get into it. As always, I do want to hear people's thoughts. If you've read these books, more than welcome to comment. I can't reply with spoilery stuff, but I can give my opinion on certain things. So if you have read the books, please take into consideration not everyone in the reading has. If you haven't, maybe you're interested, maybe you're not. Maybe trailers haven't done anything for you. Maybe you're looking forward to it. Maybe you're going to wait for fewer episodes to air. And maybe if we're from the future, we know that this might be a huge hit. People might be talking about this week to week because I've got no idea how this is going to come out of the general public. A bit like House of the Dragon when that started. I had no idea what House of the Dragon was going to be like popularity-wise. It was huge. So I'm very curious to see how this one does perform. Much smaller in scale, smaller in episode length, minutes as well, settings. I'll get into all that sorts of stuff. So as I said, please do get involved if you're a fan of Game of Thrones. We've obviously got many reviews from many years ago on the Game of Thrones series. We've got House of the Dragon season reviews as well, and we will be adding to this when this series is done. There will be a spoiler discussion. I'm looking forward to having someone on to talk about. We'll be able to talk about everything that's happened in these episodes, the specifics week to week, how their experience was watching it versus mine, how people have undertaken it. And I guess I can say this season 2 is filming. That's known. Season 2 started filming in Ireland at the start of December. And I think the plan is for 3 seasons. I think there's 3 novellas that total the book that you can purchase off the shelf. So I guess that's what I can say of the intro. And if you don't have a clue, you didn't know there's a new Game of Thrones series starting, the IMDb plot synopsis is: a century before Game of Thrones, Sir Duncan the Tall and his squire Egg wandered through Westeros whilst the Targaryen dynasty ruled the Iron Throne and dragons were still remembered. Great destinies and enemies await the incomparable friends. Odd synopsis, but it's an odd thing to market and talk about. And I think where I'm going to kickstart with this, with my thoughts going in, is that this might be one of the riskiest Game of Thrones projects. And the risk is an unspecified risk of, in terms of scale, as I said, this isn't a huge story. This isn't a story about the throne. This isn't a story about who's in control, who can get in control, a civil war, a battle, White Walkers, none of that. This is very much, we're telling a story in Westeros of these characters. And I really enjoyed it, the concepts. I'd known people online that spoke about the books, that they really enjoyed these. Now, I had no undertaking, and I'll say it now, I've not read them. It's the first time I guess you could say since the latter seasons of Game of Thrones, but it's the first time I've been able to go into a Game of Thrones or / Westeros series without knowing anything. I did know a couple of little things because I've seen tweets here and there from people that obviously read them, but there's a lot of excitement at the announcement from book readers that it's going to be something different, something, as I said, not just of scale, but the characters, the storylines, the sequences that will come through that, something we haven't really had before. And I kind of want to applaud HBO for doing this, that we absolutely don't need 2 spin-off shows at the same time about the battle for the throne. It's nice to have this. It's almost like an appetizer of, hey, here's something different that we can do that we're going to go and do now. And whilst you're waiting for House of the Dragon, or you're in the future, you'll be watching a different way, you can enjoy this smaller, different type of show. And I think it makes Westeros feel richer for that. I think it really expands upon the world building that we maybe haven't had in House of the Dragon, because House of the Dragon's been like a beautiful history lesson, but we're able to just do something a little bit different. We haven't, and it's so lovely that it's not the core concept, right? It isn't here's Targaryen 1 fighting Targaryen 2. It isn't here's the Starks, here's the Baratheons. Of course you're going to get names and you're going to get people from those houses, especially if they've got a rich history. Those houses do need to appear. It's important. But going into this, I was quite optimistic. And the 6 episodes, I know it was delayed a few months. I do wonder if the delay is intentional. Basically, I think it didn't take too long to film compared to some of the other stuff. There's not as many like CGI as visuals needed. You've got to think there's no CGI dragons at this point in Westeros. And I think this is an easier timeline for them to maybe go and do 1 show a year for 3 years. That would be the dream. the good old days of Game of Thrones and the good old days of TV where you didn't have to wait 2-3 years between seasons. So if the delay is to maybe then make the gap smaller for the next one, I'm all game for that. I don't know if they're doing season 2 back to back with season 3 or if season 3 has been announced yet, but I'd be shocked if they don't do it, given it's a plan for 3 seasons and they're already filming 2. But as I said, yeah, going into this, and something that I was also curious by was the runtimes. These episodes are notably shorter, around 30 minutes in length. A couple of the bigger ones you could say have, I think, 40 minutes. Again, to not have the full hour that HBO tends to do, it makes this easier viewing. And for me, who's sat in this very fortunate seat of seeing them all early and them all completed, I was able to binge these in one sitting. It took me 3 hours. It was like watching a film. And I really appreciated that, and that will lead to one of my critics actually for later on in this review. But I'd also talk about a bit behind the scenes. You've got the showrunner is Ira Parker, who worked on the first season of House of the Dragon. Now that first season of House of the Dragon, I love season 2 as well, but the strength of that first season, the possibilities that we can do spin-offs to Game of Thrones, we can succeed in doing that. Absolutely utilise that talent, put them somewhere else. If they've got a story they want to adapt, let them adapt it too. We should be encouraging that within these franchises rather than doing the same thing over and over. And I don't think Game of Thrones has gone down that route yet, but it's so important, again, for this next spin-off to not be about the throne, to be something else completely, to not be a sequel series from those same characters or whatnot. Sorry, I'm just stuck in my head about a show that's finished recently and what people keep crying about online. But I want to talk about the characters, because the characters make the series, and I've got to be really careful how I skirt around this. You've got Sir Duncan, known as Dunk, played by Peter Claffey, a former rugby union player who's gone into acting. I've seen him in nothing before. I thought he was great in this. He's got a really interesting personality. He isn't the lead we've had before in Game of Thrones. He isn't from a noble household. He isn't a noble individual. He's also not a scoundrel. He's not a beggar. He is, no pun intended, a Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. We're following this smaller journey with him. And he is on a quest to seek glory, is probably, I'm going to say that quite nicely. And I really enjoyed the performance. It's a character across 6 episodes you get to know, you get to love, you get to spend a lot of time with him. We learn about his backstory, his upbringings, what happened there. At the same time of that, his companion is Egg, played by Dexter Solansel, who I think played a young Coriolanus Snow in the Hunger Games, in the recent spin-off film. I've not seen him in anything. For a child actor, he's been in a lot of things already. He's great in this. He might be, maybe my second favourite performance in this. I really liked him. There's a lot about that character I cannot talk about for obvious reasons. If you read the books, you all understand. If you haven't read the books, then Egg very much is a companion piece to Dunk. If you've heard the name Dunk and Egg, this is where it comes from. This is how I'd heard of them previous to the show being adapted. And obviously I get why you can't call this series the Hedge Knight or Dunk and Egg. It wouldn't work, but I really liked this performance. I liked this character. We get a lot from him in the short 6 episode span. A surprising amount of development too, I'm going to add, and leaves me excited for the potential down the line in the 2nd and 3rd season. And if you know your Game of Thrones history, you'll obviously know a lot of other things that are going to surround not just these characters, but the characters around them, where we have my favourite character of the series, Prince Baelor, played by Bertie Carvel. Now, this is an actor I haven't seen in anything before, and this is what I love with shows like Game of Thrones, and what I'm going to hope the Harry Potter show will do in terms of British talent, theatre backgrounds, musical backgrounds, getting not necessarily a break as such, but going into a high-profile British-based show, whether it be a supporting role, a small role, a cameo or something. Bertie Carvel's a very successful stage actor. I mean, I mentioned Harry Potter. He's been cast as he's going to be Minister of Magic Cornelius Fudge. So that's a big job across the first 5 seasons and start of season 6, if you want to say that. He's got a great presence in this. He's a noble character as such, and he's one of the few things that Game of Thrones has always struggled with having, which is being a decent person. I loved what we got from him in the show. I love what we got to see from him as an actor. I think he won a Laurence Olivier Award for playing the Trunchbull in Matilda. So obviously I said he's got that musical background too. But he blended into this world seamlessly. I really appreciated him. And someone else I also want to talk about very quickly is Daniel Ings. No, not the former footballer. This is Daniel Ings, the actor. He plays Sir Lionel Baratheon in this. Not a lot I can say character-wise, development-wise, plot-wise. I've got to be careful what I say for the HBO bullet points, but this might be my favourite character of the season. Very different character to what we've seen on Game of Thrones, and by all means, this is the performance that makes the role. This is someone having their absolute best time on screen. They're lapping up every second of that screen time. They're making a tremendous impact for themselves, and I really hope he's a key player across the next couple of seasons. And that's all I'm going to kind of say with the cast. There's a stacked cast. There's a lot of British actors, ones that are new and upcoming, some I'm familiar with, a lot of character actors, but this isn't, as I said, the scale, the budget of things like Game of Thrones. There isn't a Sean Bean, there isn't a Matt Smith like House of the Dragon. This is very much a smaller scale series. And by not having the big names, it allows the people on screen to flourish, particularly, as I said, Peter Claffey playing Sir Duncan, who is the core, he's the lead of the series. He is remarkable in this, and I can't wait to see more from him, both from a physical performance and a mentality of that. And I think if the characters don't work in this show, this is probably the most character-centric of the show so far, because this is very much following these two individuals on their journey, whereas Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, the core essence is the throne, and the characters are involved around that throne. These characters are the leads that we're following for different circumstances compared to them. And that's what separates the show so well, that it needs to be praised for that. It isn't a criticism, it's a praise. And it does make me wonder what's going to happen with the more casual audience who might think, oh, it's a spin-off, oh, this isn't about the throne, is this important, is this not worth watching? I hope they give it a chance, and I think the big positive of this is that the smaller runtimes and the shorter season will help that. I think a lot of people will find it encouraging and very enjoyable. The only thing I really have to say is I think they've got this wrong with weekly releases, and I'm a massive advocate of weekly releases on TV, and maybe I'm going to get proved wrong. People are going to maybe talk about this week to week to week. My experience is that I got to see all 6 in a row, so I'm obviously having a different experience to everyone that's going to be watching this, but I don't know if it's got that firm grip to pull you back week to week. The latter episodes do, 100%, but the first 2 episodes, I'm not saying they're slower. They are introducing a new era. They're introducing new characters, new environments, things we haven't seen before in this. It needs a bit of patience and a bit of time. And I don't think it has the immediate hook that some of the other ones have had. Obviously, you know, Game of Thrones Season 1, Episode 1, end of a kid getting pushed out a window and there's weird incest going on. You can't really top that for like an outrageous opening, but its only downside is going to be how this potentially performs with them, which is great because it's not a criticism of the show, but I do wonder about this release, because by all means, when it was getting to the end of episode 3, Revelation, episode 4, 5, all got great endings to episodes that were desperate for me to continue, so it will have a great week-to-week effect, but maybe it's going to be a show that people find after a few weeks, or people are raving about it for a couple of weeks and then others start joining in. I don't know. I just think there's something about this that's slightly more difficult to market. And in contention with that, I don't think this has had the best marketing campaign at all, if I'm honest. I know it's been at a couple of lists, there's been 1 or 2 trailers, but it hasn't been in your face ready for everyone to go and sit down and watch, which is odd. Especially when HBO's just had Welcome to Derry finish from their big MVPs the last few months. So the only criticism, they're so minor. As I said, I don't want it to backfire. I don't think it will. I think there's an audience. I really hope that audience turns up. That's where I'm going with this. And where I'm going to kind of continue this review on the spoiler-free section is the new thing I'm doing for this year's reviews, the standout sequence. Again, if you read the book, you'll know I can't say this for obvious reasons. All I'm going to say is that episode 5, that's the one. That is the episode of this season. It's a good season. It's a very good show. But episode 5 is the standout for me. I really enjoyed what we got to see, how it was shot, the directors, the writing, the performers, bringing everyone together from the first few episodes. I really appreciate that, and I think that's going to be a huge episode that people will enjoy. And that kind of goes into my final thoughts on the show. To me, this is very much worth watching, and it does become a recommendation from me that I recommend seeing the show. As I said, it's 6 episodes, it's 30 minutes apiece. You're looking at 3 hours. One thing I didn't mention, is the score's being done by Dan Romer. So this is the first, I guess we could say, live-action Game of Thrones thing that isn't being done by Ramin Dwadley, who's obviously had a huge impact on the show. We don't have the opening titles that we have, obviously, with Game of Thrones, with House of the Dragon. I know everybody likes them on House of the Dragon. They don't need to be in this show at all. They really don't. It would have no purpose. There isn't really an intro titles as such. It's more of an impact opening of, this is the show. Here's the title, let's go. It works. There's a few cues that come in that you'll see recognisable, but I really like the score from Dan Roma. It's a bit more atmospheric. It doesn't need to be as grandiose because it isn't a grandiose tale doing it for the sake of it. But yes, going back to my final thought, sorry, is I absolutely recommend this. I think people are going to enjoy this. I think it's going to have a very different audience to Game of Thrones. I think people that enjoy Game of Thrones are probably going to like this when the time comes, just in terms of a duo spending time with them going on an adventure. And it makes me excited to see what is to come for Season 2 and Season 3. So it's a recommendation for me. It's starting streaming or airing this Sunday, HBO, Monday here in the UK. It will be on Sky, Now TV, HBO, the usual suspects. As I said, I'll be able to do a spoiler discussion when the season's done, and I can talk about things in a lot more detail because I've had to restrain myself on this review, and that's exactly what I'm doing. So that's me rounding out. Thank you all so much for watching. Take care.